Today, we are going to have a history lesson on what makes Mason County so freaking nuts. So, anyone who has ever taken a West Virginia history class knows that our land was filled with Native Americans. We've had a few tribes that definitely surrounded our areas in West Virginia the most, but the one we are really going to be talking about today is the Shawnee tribe. I would also like to say before I get any farther in this that I am probably going to mispronounce some of these names, and I'm sorry, but I'm doing my best. And within the Shawnee tribe was a man named Chief Cornstalk. And that is who this video centers around today. Chief Cornstalk was known to be a Shawnee leader around the 1760s through 1770s. He led Shawnee and other Native American warriors against the colonists in the Battle of Point Pleasant, but he soon became an advocate for neutrality in the American Revolutionary War. Not much is known about his early life due to it never being written down or documented, but they do estimate that he was probably born around the 1720s. And the first time there are documents of him is when he was held hostage by the British. In 1759, Cornstalk is rumored to have led a raid in what we know now as West Virginia. And just within a few years, Cornstalk and his sister established a town around this area. In 1764, Cornstalk does lead a raid against the British American colonists in the Pontiac War. There are documents that say that he surrendered himself and other hostages to help try to keep peace at this point. He took part in negotiations with a Henry Bouquet, but he then escaped after this and returned home. In 1768, the Treaty of Fort Stanwix was established. Sir William Johnson had agreed with the Iroquois that their boundary was the Ohio River, which today is now the West Virginia and Kentucky side. But settlers kept trying to push into their area, so there was a lot of unrest against the colonists and the Native Americans. And at this point, the Shawnee did help the Iroquois try to establish dominance back over their hunting land against the settlers. But in 1774, the British Americans went ahead and started pushing their way into taking over their land. It became a crisis quite quickly when the Yellow Creek Massacre happened and at least 10 Mingo Native Americans were killed. And at this point, the Mingos did retaliate against settlers. Many Shawnees did fight against the Americans to try to regain this land, but Cornstalk knew this was a terrible idea. John Conley did call for more military to come help. He specifically called for the agent of Lord Dunmore. At Fort Pitt, though, Cornstalk did fight to prevent more violence. He even got his brother Silver Heels involved, but during this, Silver Heels was shot and wounded severely by one of the settlers. And at this point, the Lord Dunmore's War began. The Shawnee and Mingos were greatly outnumbered by the Virginians. The Shawnee, Mingo, Delaware, and Wyandots only had about 300 soldiers, and there were about 2,300 Dunmore men. Cornstalk tried to recruit as many natives as he could while they were getting invaded, but it didn't seem to help hardly at all. The British officials were able to completely block them from getting any more natives to fight. And Dunmore men were able to launch a two-headed invasion. One wing was commanded by an Andrew Lewis, though. Cornstalk decided to fight the Lewis's wing of the invasion, which started the beginning of the Battle of Point Pleasant on October 10th. The Shawnees did initially have the upper hand, but once the backup arrived for the Dunmore men, they were greatly outnumbered and easily taken down. Near sundown, Cornstalk finally tried to attract all his warriors over to their side of the Ohio River, but the Dunmore's armies kept advancing anyways. Some warriors continued to fight, but Cornstalk immediately tried to set up a time to meet with Lord Dunmore to end this war. But Cornstalk agreed that the Ohio River would be the boundary of the Shawnee land. The Revolutionary Revolutionary War was quickly after the Lord Dunmore's War ended, but Cornstalk kept his tribe neutral. But as soon as summer of 1776 happened, the Shawnee and Cherokee were cooperating in a war against the Americans. But by the fall, Cornstalk had returned to Fort Pitt. Cornstalk had told the U.S. Native American agent George Morgan that yes, there were some young Shawnee men acting rashly, but he was committed to peace. But by the winter, their tribe was completely split by half of them wanting to follow Cornstalk's neutral agreement and the other half wanting to fight. In October 1777, 2 Shawnee men did go visit Fort Randolph. Matthew Arbuckle did capture these men because he had made a pact that he was going to capture any Shawnee that he ran into. Cornstalk's son did arrive a few days later to ask why his men were captured. And at this point, they imprisoned the 2 men, Cornstalk's son and Cornstalk himself. On November 10th, there was a soldier that was killed by an unknown Native American. In retaliation, angry soldiers went and killed Cornstalk, his son, and the 2 Shawnee men. When the soldiers came to get Cornstalk, it is said that he was standing facing them and seemed really brave, but they quickly opened fire on him and shot him with a musket 8 times. And while he was dying, he spoke his legendary curse. One named Dreadhawk did try to escape through the chimney, but they quickly captured him and slaughtered him. His son was shot just where he was sitting, and the other Native American was strangled to death. American soldiers were shocked by Cornstalk's murder and claimed that these vile assassins needed to be brought to justice immediately. But when it came time for Cornstalk's trial, no American soldiers would testify against these murderers, so they were acquitted. His death cost them a very big voice of reason, and his death only caused the Native Americans to believe that the British Americans could not be trusted at all. And more Shawnee and other allies joined this fight once Cornstalk was murdered. His sister did move to Fort Randolph and become an interpreter and a messenger for the Americans. And by 1794, the town of Point Pleasant was established where this fort was. In August 1909, there was an 86-foot monument made for Chief Cornstalk. There was a dedication ceremony set for July 22nd. The night before the event had clear skies, but all of a sudden there was lightning ringing through it. And the lightning struck the crane that was going to be used to put the monument in place. The lightning severely damaged this crane, and it took about a month to repair. On July 4th, 1921, more lightning struck this monument. It damaged the capstone and the granite blocks. They did replace them though, and the monument still stands today. In 1954, they did tear down the courthouse, which was where Cornstalk's remains were. They were then reburied in 2 Indieway State Park, where the Battle of Point Pleasant occurred, and they were put in the statue of him there. Now let's talk about his dying curse. He claims it's due to all the bloodshed of the Native Americans in that area. And while he was dying, his curse, he said, was, "I was the border man's friend. Many times I have saved him and his people from harm. I never warred with you, but only to protect our wigwams and land. I refused to join your pale-faced enemies with the redcoats. I came to the fort as your friend and you murdered me. You have murdered by my side my young son. For this, may the curse of the Great Spirit rest upon this land. May it even be blighted in its hopes. May it even be blighted by nature. May the strength of its peoples be paralyzed." But it is strongly hinted towards this curse is what made Mason County the most haunted county in West Virginia, along with the fact of Point Pleasant being the most haunted city. This curse is thought to cause thousands of misfortunes in this area. So I want to go over some of the things that are thought to be linked to this curse. In June 1944, there was a tornado that ripped through the area area and killed about 150 people. December 15th, 1967, when the Silver Bridge fell, is also thought to be part of this curse. I'm sure everyone has heard of Mothman. It is also thought that there is a lot more psychological issues within this area, and just like weird coincidences, like January 1978, when a freight train derailed and just dumped thousands of gallons of toxic chemicals in the area. But April that same year, a town called St. Mary's in the area had 51 men that were killed in a scaffolding accident where they worked at the Willow Island power plant. Lightning striking this monument was also thought to be part of this curse, and river tragedies such as the bar explosion in 1953. Floods have almost destroyed this town in the early 1900s, and there has been an overwhelming amount of fires. There's a large number of areas that have paranormal activity in this region, and there's also an overwhelming amount of missing people in this area. People have thought that the actual Men in Black have ties with Point Pleasant, and people also believe it's a sort of window into another dimension. I do truly think that the Native Americans had these types of powers. It would completely make sense on why this area is so creepy and just so many weird things happen there. And also, it was just something I wanted to talk about on how sad it was that he was killed so wrongfully and his murderers were just set free. And it's so sad that the American soldiers at first were claiming they wanted to get justice for Cornstalk and they needed to take care of these vile assassins, but they refused to even testify against them in court. And it's just really sad that his life was ultimately taken just for fighting for peace. But that is all I have on Chief Cornstalk. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for me and hit that notification button. That way you're notified with my next videos. Please comment below on what you think about the curse and do you believe it has an effect on this area. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!